The heavy oak doors of the federal courtroom creaked open, drawing every eye toward the entrance. Inside, the air was so thick it might as well have been visible. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, robed and stoic, took his seat at the bench. His eyes, hidden beneath the glint of polished lenses, briefly flicked to the defense table where Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat. She was composed, hands folded neatly on the table, jaw set. Her team flanked her, silent and sharp, their folders closed, but their expressions loaded. The spectators, journalists, and political operatives that filled every pew leaned forward, sensing something electric brewing. Rumors had flooded D.C. the night before. A leaked audio recording, one that could change everything, existed. An audio tape so damning it could not only vindicate Crockett, but shake the very foundations of the court. Yet inside these four walls, everything was still. Too still. Justice Thomas cleared his throat, the microphone catching even the smallest sound. "Let us proceed," he said, his voice steady but missing its usual bite. Crockett's lead attorney, Renata Bell, rose from her chair. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense must raise an urgent matter," she said crisply. "Pertinent new evidence has surfaced, evidence that demands immediate attention." Thomas didn't flinch. "This court will not entertain rumors," he said, already dismissing the motion with a flick of his hand. But the gallery's restless shifting spoke louder than words. Everyone knew what was at stake. Jasmine Crockett's eyes never left Thomas. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just waited for the bomb to drop that everyone outside this courtroom already suspected was on its way. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. 48 hours earlier, in the murky haze of political back channels and encrypted emails, a single file had begun its deadly journey. The audio file, codenamed Operation Eclipse by its anonymous courier, first surfaced in a dusty Dropbox link emailed to half a dozen independent journalists known for one thing: fearlessness. What they heard was stunning. The recording captured a private conversation between Justice Clarence Thomas and two senior federal prosecutors, an off-the-record discussion that was never supposed to see daylight. His voice, low and deliberate, laid out a strategy to expedite enforcement actions against Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. "We must present the appearance of procedural compliance," Thomas said. "Delay their discovery motions, accelerate contempt proceedings, secure detainment before public sympathy has a chance to grow." There was a pause, then laughter, the prosecutors agreeing, their voices dripping with collusion. By the next morning, political blogs were ablaze. Twitter exploded. Hashtags like #ThomasGate and #Operation Eclipse trended globally. Cable news scrambled to verify the authenticity. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Jasmine Crockett herself learned of the leak mid-morning, just as she was preparing for another procedural hearing she knew was rigged against her. Renata had burst into her office, a laptop open and streaming the audio, pale as paper. "Is that real?" Jasmine asked quietly. Renata just nodded, throat too tight for words. By noon, mainstream networks cautiously began reporting on the existence of unverified but credible leaked audio implicating a sitting Supreme Court justice in strategic misconduct. The Department of Justice issued a terse no comment. The White House Communications Office reportedly monitored the situation. And behind the closed doors of the Supreme Court, Thomas's chambers scrambled. Damage control meetings were hastily convened. Spokespersons rehearsed non-denial denials. The fortress was beginning to crack, and Jasmine Crockett knew. This time she would not be the one on trial. Not anymore. The courtroom settled into a hushed anticipation as Renata Bell adjusted the microphone before her. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the static tension, "the defense respectfully demands that the court address new evidence crucial to these proceedings. Justice Thomas's jaw clenched. The court reminds counsel that hearsay and unverified materials will not be entertained. Renata didn't blink. She lifted a slim silver flash drive between two fingers. The authenticity has already been verified by 2 independent forensic analysts, she said. An signed affidavit has been filed. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Phones buzzed under the benches. Thomas adjusted his robe. This court will recess for 10 minutes to verify the material. Before he could slam the gavel, a murmur surged through the gallery. Something unusual was happening. The courtroom doors swung open, and a clerk sprinted down the aisle, clutching a folder. "Your Honor!" the clerk panted, handing the file to the bench. "A motion from the Sixth Circuit. An emergency review request regarding new evidence against this court." The color drained from Thomas's face. He stared at the folder like it might explode. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly, not moving, not celebrating. She knew better. The system never admitted its cracks easily. But the pressure was mounting, and this time the cracks were too deep to plaster over. The leaked audio had changed the battlefield, and Clarence Thomas had no idea how much more he was about to lose. It hadn't started as a conspiracy. Not exactly. It had started in whispered conversations late at night in the corridors of power. Clarence Thomas, long irritated by what he perceived as insubordination from young, defiant politicians like Jasmine Crockett, saw an opportunity. "She needs to be made an example," he reportedly told a confidant after one heated subcommittee hearing. The plan unfolded over bourbon and low voices. At a private club in Georgetown, Thomas met with senior federal prosecutors. No official record, no oversight. "Delay her evidence access," Thomas instructed. "Flood her team with procedural roadblocks. Fast-track contempt charges." The prosecutors, ambitious and eager for favor, nodded along. Documents were withheld. Subpoenas were accelerated. Crockett's legal team received cryptic emails about system maintenance when trying to access files. Files later shown to be freely accessible to the prosecution. Every move was carefully calculated. The goal was simple. Overwhelm Jasmine Crockett, force her into non-compliance, and then jail her for contempt. Publicly, spectacularly. Thomas believed it would be swift and clean, a quick ruling, a muted news cycle, and an arrogant message sent to anyone who dared question the hierarchy. He had underestimated only one thing. Jasmine Crockett didn't scare easily, and the people watching from the sidelines weren't going to stay silent this time. The night before the hearing, Jasmine Crockett sat alone in a dim hotel room overlooking the courthouse plaza. She had dismissed her team hours ago, insisting they rest, though she herself knew sleep wouldn't come. On the desk before her lay a simple notepad filled with handwritten notes. Reminders, anchors. Not legal arguments, but affirmations of why she had chosen this fight. They want compliance, not justice. Truth needs witnesses. Stand tall. The leaked audio had shifted the battleground, but Jasmine knew better than to celebrate too soon. Power didn't crumble easily. It dug in deeper, fought dirtier. Her mind drifted to her parents, teachers who had taught her to value courage over comfort. She thought of the students she once defended as a civil rights attorney, young voices smothered under the weight of bureaucracy and brutality. They had once looked to her for strength. Now an entire country was starting to do the same. In the faint glow of the city lights, Jasmine whispered to herself, "You're not just standing for you." At sunrise, she pulled on her navy blazer, smoothed the lapels, and walked toward the courthouse through streets lined with quiet supporters holding signs. They didn't chant. They didn't shout. They just watched her pass, heads high, eyes fierce, inside the courtroom. The battle was just beginning. As Justice Thomas tried to contain the damage within the courtroom, outside those walls, the truth was detonating. At precisely 9:32 a.m., a verified journalist from the Washington Sentinel posted a 10-second clip of the leaked audio. It was enough. delay their discovery motions, expedite contempt proceedings, secure detainment. The video went viral within minutes. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, feeds flooded with outrage, disbelief, and a shared demand: accountability. Outside the courthouse, what had started as a modest gathering swelled rapidly. Protesters arrived in waves, many still wearing scrubs, delivery uniforms, or construction gear. Ordinary people, nurses, drivers, teachers, dropping everything to bear witness. Inside, Jasmine's phone buzzed against the wooden table where she sat. A single glance at Renata told her everything she needed to know. The story had escaped the courthouse. There would be no silencing it now. Justice Thomas, clearly rattled, tried to maintain decorum. He ordered bailiffs to ensure order in the courtroom, but the tremor in his hand when he lifted his gavel betrayed the truth. From the gallery, the buzz of reporters' phones filled the heavy air. Urgent whispers spread like wildfire. Cameras clicked, eyes narrowed. Jasmine leaned slightly toward Renata and murmured, "We don't have to prove anything anymore. They're proving it for us." Renata nodded. "Now we just have to survive the fallout." Because when the system cracked, it didn't just fall. It shattered, loudly, violently, and with no warning for those standing too close. And Clarence Thomas was about to find himself standing alone in the blast zone. The courtroom felt like a cracked dam ready to burst. Justice Thomas adjusted his robe and leaned forward, gripping the edges of the bench so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The murmurs in the gallery refused to die down. Phones continued buzzing despite repeated warnings. Reporters were practically vibrating in their seats. Renata Bell rose smoothly from the defense table. "Your Honor, in light of the newly released audio, we move for your immediate recusal." Thomas slammed the gavel down. "Order!" The sound echoed through the chamber, but it didn't bring silence. It only amplified the sense of unraveling. "Your Honor," Renata pressed on, "the integrity of these proceedings has been compromised." Thomas's face flushed a deep crimson. "This court has not—" He stopped. Somewhere in the back, a reporter dropped a pen. It clattered loudly against the marble floor, breaking the illusion of control. Crockett stood without being called. She spoke clearly, evenly. "The country heard you," she said. "They heard every word." Thomas's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. A single drop splashed onto the papers in front of him. Across the country, television screens replayed the audio clip on a loop. Panels of legal experts speculated in real time whether Thomas had violated judicial ethics, or worse. Inside the courtroom, the walls seemed to close in. Thomas's clerk leaned towards him and whispered urgently. Thomas nodded stiffly. "This court is calling a 15-minute recess," he said, his voice cracked. He rose quickly, his robe sweeping the floor behind him as he disappeared into chambers, but no recess could fix what had already broken. Outside, the chants grew louder. Inside, Jasmine Crockett sat back in her chair, knowing full well the system had blinked first. By the time Thomas retreated into his private chambers, the city was already on fire. Metaphorically, cable news anchors breathlessly read breaking headlines. Twitter hashtags multiplied by the second. #judicial corruption, #resign Thomas, #stand with Crockett. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had doubled, then tripled. Protesters waved signs that read "Truth over power" and "The people are watching." Drone footage from news helicopters captured a sea of bodies flooding downtown Cleveland. Local businesses handed out bottled water and snacks to demonstrators. Makeshift stages were assembled as civil rights leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens took turns addressing the gathering crowds. Meanwhile, inside the marble walls of power, something even bigger was brewing. Members of Congress, both expected allies and surprising conservatives, issued public statements demanding a full judicial inquiry. If these allegations are true, Senator Eliza Moreno said live on MSNBC, Justice Thomas has irreparably damaged the integrity of the court. He must be held accountable. Phone lines at the Supreme Court's Public Affairs Office crashed under the volume of furious callers. Editorials in major papers demanded swift action. The Department of Justice announced the opening of a preliminary ethics investigation, and all the while Jasmine Crockett remained silent inside the courthouse, refusing interviews, refusing theatrics. She didn't have to shout. She didn't have to plead. The truth was shouting for her now, and the world was finally listening. Late in the afternoon, under gray, trembling skies, an emergency judicial panel convened in a sealed teleconference. Their decision came faster than anyone had expected. Inside the courthouse, Jasmine Crockett and her team were ushered back into the courtroom. Thomas did not return. Instead, a substitute judge, Judge Maureen Dillard of the Sixth Circuit, entered through the side door, her presence commanding immediate attention. The gallery fell into a charged silence. Judge Dillard wasted no time. In light of the newly surfaced and authenticated audio recording, she said, this court finds grounds to immediately dismiss the contempt proceedings against Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Some spectators cried out. Others simply exhaled long-held breaths. Jasmine sat motionless, absorbing every word. Furthermore, Judge Dillard continued, this court formally recommends an independent judicial ethics review of Justice Clarence Thomas, based on credible evidence of procedural misconduct and bias. There it was. In the open, no denials, no spin. Cameras flashed. Reporters raced for the exits to break the story. Outside, the crowd's roar shook the courthouse windows. Inside, Jasmine finally closed her eyes for a brief second, not in relief, but in recognition. The battle was not over. It had only changed fronts. The sun was setting over Cleveland when Jasmine Crockett stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The scene before her was breathtaking. Thousands of supporters filled the streets. Banners waved, candles flickered. People cheered and wept and held each other in triumph. Jasmine moved to the podium hastily set up by her team. She didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. I stood here yesterday accused, she said, voice ringing clear through the thickening evening air. Not because I broke the law, but because I refused to bow. The crowd cheered. They thought they could silence one voice and keep the system intact. But what they forgot, what they always forget, is that truth has a voice. And today, that voice is louder than ever. Thunderous applause shook the pavement. Across the nation, news anchors dropped their scripted segments. Analysts speculated whether Thomas could survive the political fallout. Legal scholars debated whether impeachment proceedings were imminent. But Jasmine didn't care about their speculation. Her focus was on the faces before her, young, old, black, white, every shape and shade of the American story, all united by a singular hunger for justice. She left the podium without fanfare, stepping into the crowd, shaking hands, hugging strangers, accepting whispered thank yous from people who had never seen someone stand so tall against so much. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett knew. This wasn't the end of a battle. It was the beginning of a movement. The courthouse behind her, Jasmine Crockett found herself alone on the steps as the crowd gradually began to thin under the stars. Camera crews packed up their gear. Volunteers collected discarded signs. The adrenaline of the day gave way to a quiet, aching stillness. Jasmine tightened her jacket against the cool night air and descended the steps slowly, her heels clicking softly against the marble. Across the street, a small group of teenagers, no more than 16 or 17 years old, stood by a lamppost, holding their phones high. still live streaming, still refusing to look away. One of them caught her eye and raised a simple cardboard sign. It read, "We see you." Jasmine's chest tightened. She lifted her hand in a small, steady wave. She didn't need speeches anymore. She didn't need rallies or headlines. The truth had already taken root. As she turned the corner toward her waiting car, she paused for a final look at the courthouse, a towering monument of stone and steel that for too long had shielded the powerful. Tonight that fortress had cracked, and in its place something new was growing. Belief. Belief that even against impossible odds, one voice could still matter. One stand could still spark a fire. Jasmine Crockett whispered under her breath, meant for no one but herself. "They tried to silence me. They only made my voice louder." And somewhere deep inside the marble walls she left behind, the system felt it too, the tremor of a reckoning that would not be stopped. Not tonight. Not ever. She climbed into her car, rolled down the window to feel the cool night air on her face, and disappeared into the city streets, already planning the next battle.